read 12 books in September, so today is the day that we're going to talk about them. Normally what I would do is I would walk you through like day by day and we would talk about the books that I read, but I want to do it differently today in that I want to talk about the bad books first and then talk about the books that I actually enjoyed. So we're gonna do that. 12 books. I have some notes on my phone. I don't know when to stop talking, so we're gonna just get into this. I will say preemptively, some of these books are books that I have previously talked about because in September I did the My Husband Chose My TBR week, and so some of the books I've already talked about because they would be in that video. So for full scale reviews, you can go to that video. It's up here somewhere. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. I only have one-star book, and that was The Bet by Rachel Van Dyken. And my biggest problem with this book and why it has such a low rating is the writing for a romance novel felt very juvenile to me. I told my friends that the female main character calls the one of the male main characters like romantic interests, lovers, if you will. She calls them skanks, and I just couldn't get on board with that. I literally haven't heard the word skank since I was like 14 years old. So juvenile writing, poor character development. I did not really enjoy the story. It kind of felt like it was moving too fast while simultaneously going nowhere. So I was not a huge fan of this, and this book will not be staying in my collection. It's gonna go to a little free library. Maybe somebody else can enjoy it. I read The Bet in one sitting. It's only 240 pages. I say only 240 pages, but because the writing is so simplistic, it was very easy to get through. And then I picked up a book on my Kindle for my book club. This month, my friend Sheree picked our book, and she picked The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. And I really have to say this, I don't really rate books entirely on their enjoyability. I have degrees in English, I have a degree in library science. I rate like a freaking book critic. I'm looking for character development, fully fleshed out characters, good storyline, no plot holes, and I'm looking for writing that doesn't feel like my 7th grade self could do it. And so for The Housemaid, the story itself was very enjoyable, but my main issue, and I talked about this during book club, my main issue was that if I had to hear Millie talk about how hot she thought Andrew was one more time, I wanted to like pluck my eyeballs from my head. It was a great story. I looked forward to going home and reading it and everything. I just couldn't get around the writing. And I understand, you know, if you've read The Housemaid, that's probably part of Millie's shtick. She was in prison for a long time. I just didn't like the writing that much. I just felt like so much more character development could have been done, and I didn't have any interest in reading the second book. So for me, I think that was indicative of my 2-star rating. That being said, I will read more Frida McFadden books because I think that there weren't enough things that were problematic, in my opinion, for me to just completely write Frida McFadden off as an author. So I will give her another chance to win me over. I've done this with Colleen Hoover as well. I will give her another chance and I'll read more of her books, but it wasn't my favorite. That was one of my 2-star reads. I do have another 2-star read. I know that I talked about my husband going underway and everything. He's out to sea right now, and before he left, he said that we should read a book together just to kind of have something besides work to talk about while he's out to sea. So I had him download the Libby app. He downloaded the Kindle app on his phone, and before he went out, we scrolled through Libby together and decided to read The Perfect Couple by Ellen Hildebrand, which was marketed as a romance on Libby. It is not. So I'm gonna pull up what Eric says for his review in my email. He did chat to me about this book while he was reading it, and I was like, just save it. Eric says it's been a while since he sat down and read a book from start to finish, and he thinks that this book was definitely not the one to be the first book that he's picked up in a long time. The biggest thing that he didn't like is that throughout the book we kind of bounce back and forth. It's a time change through every chapter. So we get the past, we get the present, we get the past, we get the present, and it's all from different characters' points of view, which could be very hard to keep track of. This is me adding to his review. I think it would have been better if it was in a timely order. That might just be the new reader mindset. The story wasn't a bad one. The ending wasn't what I was expecting. I'm not gonna read the rest of his review because there are spoilers in there. With all of that being said, I give the book 2 out of 5 stars. And then he messaged me last night before I went to bed and said the best part of that book was when they talked about Friday Night Lights, because we watched that show together, and when they talked about the Eagles, even though they talked about them being losers. My husband's a huge Eagles fan, so I highlighted those 2 points in the book to bring up in my discussion to him because I was like, oh, this is hilarious that these things are being talked about. So basically, the perfect couple is set on Nantucket on the weekend of this couple's wedding, and then the day of the wedding, the maid of honor turns up dead. So it's kind of like a whodunit, but that, like I said, and like he said, the ending of the book was not great. I didn't like any of the characters. I didn't feel like anybody was truly fleshed out as a character. I would not completely write Ellen Hildebrand off as an author, but I just don't think that this was the right start for me to read her. This is the first book that I've ever read from Ellen Hildebrand, and I also didn't really like it. It was 481 pages of quite literally nothing. The ending was such a disappointment. This was also a 2-star read for me, but with that being said, I would not say, hey, I'm never reading another Ellen Hildebrand book in my entire life. Okay, so that's my second Kindle book for this month, and now we're going to talk about the last Kindle book that I've read this month. I decided to also chip away at the books that I have sitting on my Kindle in Kindle Unlimited, and I read a dark romance, Havoc at Prescott High by C.M. Stunich. Now, dark romance, in my opinion, never really has too much of a plot. We're just here for the vibes, right? It is straight up smut. But with that being said, Havoc at Prescott High, the writing was pretty great. I want to read some of the things that I highlighted, and these quotes that I'm going to pull up are the reason why this book was a 3-star read for me instead of a 2. I don't normally rate like smutty books that high because, you know, I'm not really here to like be a critic of these. I'm just here for the enjoyment. Like that is like a mindless, let me read a book just to have something to do kind of thing. Havoc at Prescott High had some excellent quotes. I actually texted one of my friends one of the quotes that I highlighted because it was just perfect. So I have 3 things highlighted. I'm stronger now, but part of being stronger means recognizing when you've got a trigger and deciding if facing off against that trigger will truly bring you any peace. See, that's the thing with pain. Once it finds you and grabs hold, it doesn't let go easily. It's always there, a demon with reaching claws. The monsters come anyway, whether you wear short skirts or sweats. So these things really jumped out to me. It wasn't terrible writing. Basically, it's this girl who hires this gang at her high school to help her with her hit list, essentially. And these boys, the 5 members of this gang, literally made this girl's life hell previously. So they're her bullies. So it's like a bully romance too. I went into it like knowing, hey, this is like a high school romance. It is not for young adults. It is not for young adults. I texted my friend and she was like, oh, let me put it on my list. And I was like, you might want to actually like read the book. I wouldn't recommend listening to the audio version if there is an audio version because I feel like you will immediately get the ick. And she was like, yeah, I'll probably read it. But I sent her pictures of the cover and everything so that she could look into it if she's interested. I already started the 2nd book in the series. So, I mean, it ended on a cliffhanger and it wasn't terrible enough for me to stop reading the series. So, you know, I enjoyed it, but we're not talking about enjoyability here for the most part. We're talking about if the writing was good. That's how I review. So I enjoyed it, but you know, the enjoyability isn't what necessarily makes it a 5-star read for me. I look for a lot of other things. So that was a 3. I also have another book that my husband picked for me for my husband chose my TBR. That was Inspection by Josh Malerman. This one follows 2 different schools in the woods, one with all boys, one with all girls, and they don't know anything about each other. Josh Malerman and I have a complicated relationship because I liked Bird Box so much, but this one was very hard for me to get into. Like I said in my last video, I listened to the audio for the first part of this book, but in the end, I enjoyed it, and his writing is great, but it was brutal at the end. And for me, I did not go into this expecting child brutality. So that was a 3-star for me. So I will pick up more Josh Malerman books. This one didn't completely turn me off of reading him. Up next, for 3-star reads, we have a book of the month, and it's kind of a newer book of the month too. It was a June release. This is She Started It by Cyan Gilbert. This is a debut, so I went a little easier on it than I think that I typically would have. This is another one where it feels like it's petty revenge. So we have women who were horrible to this young lady when they were in high school. Her name's Poppy. These girls bully the shit out of Poppy in high school, and then Poppy invites them them to her bachelorette weekend on this beautiful island, this secluded island in the Bahamas. I talked about this in the 5 thrillers that I want to read in September video that I posted, and I talked about how it was described as like Lord of the Flies but with Instagram. It is, but it's a lot more brutal than Lord of the Flies. Basically, Poppy invites her friends to join her on this island, and then one by one, bad things start happening to these women. 4 best friends plus Poppy on the island, and then dreadful, dreadful things start to happen. It's a debut, so I wasn't really expecting terrific writing, and I wasn't very impressed with the writing style. It kind of was hard for me to get through this, but the twist at the end, I kind of saw coming, but it didn't take away from the fact that I still enjoyed it. So we bounced between the girls' perspectives, including Poppy's old diary. So it's Annabelle, Chloe, Tanya, and Esther. We bounce between their 4 perspectives, and then we get Poppy's diary entries from when the girls were bullying her. And that could have been great, except for I just felt like they're women in their 30s. Women in their 30s, I am one, spoiler alert, don't act like this. It was incredibly catty, and you know, I thought that I was gonna be here for it. For some reason it just wasn't working for me, and maybe it just wasn't the right time, and if I had read it at a different time I would have given it a higher rating, but it was just average for me at best. So it was a 3-star. And that's the last of the 3 stars because I had a very good month from here. We have 4 4-star books to talk about and 2 5s. So wrapping up quickly with the books that my husband, you know, picked for me. Blood Sisters by Jane Corey, which follows 2 sisters who are in a terrible, terrible accident and bounces back and forth between their perspectives, right? It was great. I loved it so much I sought out another Jane Corey book to be able to read, and I'm very excited because they are like the same size and shape and have the same kind of cover, which makes me excited. So I really, really liked this book. The writing is great. The character development is great. The plot is very, very like good. Very much enjoyed this, but I don't want to talk too much about it because I have other videos that you can watch where I talk way more in depth about that. And then we have Gallows Hill by Darcy Coates, which was my second 4-star read from My Husband Chose My TBR. This one started out slow for me, and I really thought that it was just gonna be average, but it was so intense. I could not put it down. I freaking love this book. It was so close to being a 5 for me. So close to being a 5. One thing that I liked about these two, this one's like more of a horror and this is a thriller. I don't really love when thrillers have that like pointless male romance interest. I don't really love that. Neither of these books have a pointless male love interest, so I was here for it. So those were both 4, and then we'll talk about the other 2 4-stars that I had. Both of them are book of the month. Both of them were from my 5 thrillers that I want to read videos. So we have The Golden Couple by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. It follows main couple Marissa Bishop and Matthew Bishop after Marissa has cheated on Matthew and seeks out therapy with their therapist Avery, who is no longer licensed to practice psychology. So this one was so good. I forgot how much I love this writing duo until I picked this up. So much so that I've added more of their books to my immediate TBR, not just like to my bookshelf, to my immediate TBR. One thing about their writing, I don't know how it works, it just does. So this one, we again are bouncing back and forth between Marissa and Avery. I seem to like rotating POVs, rotating timelines, that's fine. Marissa, you can tell, isn't telling Avery everything that Avery wants to know, and there is something so off about Matthew throughout the entirety of this book. I really liked it and did not expect to see what happened happen. So this was a 4-star, and like I said, immediately put some more of Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen on my immediate TBR. I picked up Not a Happy Family by Sherry LaPena. I love her books. Every time I see people talking about her books, I'm like, yeah, she's great. And I don't know why I have not read more of her up until this point. So Not a Happy Family is set in New York. It follows this really, really wealthy family, and we're basically trying to figure out who killed the figureheads, the mother and father of this very wealthy family, because the children are all set to inherit like so much money upon the death of their parents, and then after Easter they show up dead. This book was wild. I just think that like it showcases the absolute audacity that some people have. The children are all, none of them are likable. None of the children are likable in this book, and you kind of can see how any of them could have been the ones to like off their family. Ending was not strong enough for me to give this 5 stars. That is why it is a 4-star read. The writing is great, the characters are developed, the plot is there, but the ending was lacking for me. So this was a 4-star, so close to being a 5-star. I love her books. I will be finding more of her to read because she's just great. I read The Couple Next Door as my first foray into Shari LaPena's writing, and it was wonderful. This is also great. I'm adding more books from her to my TBR like immediately. And then my 2 5-star reads. 2 5-star reads in 1 month is phenomenal to me. I've maybe had like a handful of 5-star reads. I have talked about Riley Sager countless times on this channel, so you all know how much I love his writing. This might be my favorite book that he's written to date, which says a lot because Final Girls and The Last Time I Lied are books that I think about almost daily to this day, and I read them so long ago. This book was so good. I read this book basically in 1 sitting. Okay, the only one left follows our main character, Kit, as she is tasked to take care of Lenora Hope, this woman who in the 20s killed her entire family, or so the town claims. Kit is assigned to take care of Lenora after being suspended from her job for 6 months, and we don't know why she's been suspended. I just was captivated. This book, it was so good. His writing never lets me down. One thing that I will note is that he's a big one for putting in needless love interest in his books. This one doesn't have that, so maybe that's why it's like my favorite of his works. But when you get to the part where it is starting to take a turn, you're gonna see that it is like twist after twist after twist. A lot of people didn't like that. I was here for it. There was a part where I was like, wait, what? And I had to go back and read over again what was just written twice because I was like, I don't think my pea brain is grasping it. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I am gonna ask my husband to read it when he comes home because I think that he will like it too. It has a very gothic feel to it. Still a little bit thrillery. I love a good gothic. This one hit it. It hit it for me. I have one more. We also have talked many times about Lisa Jewell on this channel, and I know that you all are not gonna be surprised to see that None of This Is True was a 5-star read for me. People did not like the ending. I am a big fan of how it ended because it's like, how do we know what was actually true and what wasn't true in this book, you know? None of the narrators are very reliable. We didn't get enough of some of the characters to know if what they were saying is true. I loved this book. It was a great way for me to like end this month, even though it wasn't the last book I read. So we have Alex Summers and Josie Fair as our 2 main characters. Alex is a podcaster. Josie is just a random woman that sees Alex out on what is both of their 45th birthdays. Josie approaches Alex and says, hey, I've listened to your podcast about women making all of these wonderful changes in their lives. I want you to make a podcast about me. You interview them after they've already done all of these amazing things in their life. I want you to interview me as I'm doing these amazing things to change my life. And Alex agrees. It was a wild ride, okay? I cannot speak highly enough about Lisa Jewell's writing. She's phenomenal. I loved it. I loved it so much. That's the last book that I have to talk about. I cannot believe how succinct I was in this video. So let me know how you liked me doing it this way. If you want me to go back to my old way of talking about book by book in the order that I've read, or if you prefer me to start with the bad, end with the good. Let me know. I'm curious. Before I go, I want to show you my sweater. My friend's sister made it for me. It says, drink coffee, read books, be happy. You're gonna see it again because I'm gonna start filming my very first vlog after I finish with this. I will see you guys next time. Goodbye. I will pick up. Sorry about that. There's a ball by my leg and Miss Ma'am needed to get that ball desperately.